AP News in brief at 6:04 p.m. EDT. A locally owned newspaper dedicated to the service of God and mankind. Israel strikes Gaza, Syria and West Bank as war against Hamas threatens to ignite other fronts. Time equals 400 ms, greater than Rafah. Gaza Strip, AP, Israeli warplanes struck targets across Gaza, 2 airports in Syria and a mosque in the occupied West Bank allegedly used by militants, as the 2-week-old war with Hamas threatened to spiral Sunday into a broader conflict. Israel has traded fire with Lebanon's Hezbollah militant group since the war began, and tensions are soaring in the occupied West Bank, where Israeli forces have battled militants in refugee camps and carried out 2 airstrikes in recent days. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told troops in northern Israel that if Hezbollah launches a war, it will make the mistake of its life. We will cripple it with a force it cannot even imagine, and the consequences for it and the Lebanese state will be devastating. For days, Israel has been on the verge of launching a ground offensive in Gaza following Hamas' deadly October 7 rampage, with tanks and troops massed at the border. Israel's military spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, said the country had increased airstrikes across Gaza to hit targets that would reduce the risk to troops in the next stage of the war. Dwindling fuel supplies for Gaza's hospital generators put premature babies in incubators at risk. Deir al-Balah, Gaza Strip, AP, A premature baby squirms inside a glass incubator in the neonatal ward of Al-Aqsa Hospital in the central Gaza Strip. He cries out as intravenous lines are connected to his tiny body. A ventilator helps him breathe as a catheter delivers medication and monitors flash his fragile vital signs. His life hinges on the constant flow of electricity, which is in danger of running out imminently unless the hospital can get more fuel for its generators. Once the generators stop, hospital director Iyad Abu Zahar fears that the babies in the ward, unable to breathe on their own, will perish. The responsibility on us is huge, he said. Time equals 400 ms, greater than. Doctors treating premature babies across Gaza are grappling with similar fears. At least 130 premature babies are at grave risk across 6 neonatal units, aid workers said. The dangerous fuel shortages are caused by the Israeli blockade of Gaza, which started, along with airstrikes, after Hamas militants attacked Israeli towns on October 7. Time equals 400 ms, greater than. At least 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza are unable to access essential health services, and some 5,500 are due to give birth in the coming month, according to the World Health Organization. Blinken, Austin say U.S. is ready to respond if U.S. personnel become targets of Israel-Hamas war. Time equals 400 ms, greater than. Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. AP, Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on Sunday said the United States expects the Israel-Hamas war to escalate through involvement by proxies of Iran, and asserted that the Biden administration is prepared to respond if American personnel or armed forces become the target of any such hostilities. This is not what we want, not what we're looking for. We don't want escalation, Blinken said. We don't want to see our forces or our personnel come under fire. But if that happens, we're ready for it, Austin, echoing Blinken, said. What we're seeing is a prospect of a significant escalation of attacks on our troops and our people throughout the region. He said the U.S. has the right to self-defense, and we won't hesitate to take the appropriate action. The warning from the high-ranking U.S. officials came as Israel's military response to a deadly October 7 attack by Hamas on civilians in communities in southern Israel entered its 3rd week. A police dog attacked a black trucker on his knees. An Ohio city is dealing with the aftermath. Circleville, Ohio, AP, as Jadarius Rose drove his 18-wheeler through rural Ohio, a simple missing mudflap caught the highway patrol's eye. The trip ended with a police dog's powerful jaws clamping down on Rose even as he tried to surrender. As he stood with his hands up beside the highway on July 4, at least 6 law enforcement officers surrounded him at a distance, one calling forcefully to the canine handler, "Do not release the dog." Highway patrol video shows. Nevertheless, a Belgian Malinois is seen on the video either breaking free or being set loose. At first, the animal seems confused, racing past Rose toward officers at the far end of the truck, then turning back and running for Rose, then 23. By then the trucker is on his knees, hands still high, as an officer shouts, "Get the dog off of him." That day, Rose joined a long list of Black Americans attacked by police dogs, a history well documented by journalists, academics and filmmakers. Investigations into such cases have been launched regularly in recent years. For some, the scenes harken back to the civil rights movement, when authorities often turned dogs and fire hoses on peaceful black protesters marching for equality. Mired in economic crisis, Argentines weigh whether to hand reins to anti-establishment populist Buenos Aires, Argentina. AP, frustrated voters in Argentina weighed whether to hand the presidency to a right-wing populist who has shaken up the political system and pledges to drastically overhaul the state if he wins Sunday's election. Javier Milei, a self-described anarcho-capitalist who admires former U.S. President Donald Trump, sent shockwaves through the nation after receiving the most votes in the August primaries. The chainsaw-wielding economist and first-year lawmaker has said he will slash public spending, halve the number of government ministries, eliminate the central bank and replace the local currency with the U.S. dollar. He first made a name for himself with angry tirades blasting what he calls the political caste on television, and has gained support from Argentines struggling to make ends meet amid annual inflation of 140% and a rapidly depreciating currency. His platform also calls for reshaping Argentine culture, and he casts himself as a crusader against the sinister forces of socialism at home and abroad. Argentina is in for a wild ride. Benjamin Netanyahu, director of the Latin America program at the Washington-based Wilson Center, said, "The most likely scenario is rather worrisome. A polarized society, divided Congress, combative and inexperienced leader and an economy hurtling toward an abyss." Polls closed at 6 p.m., 2100 GMT. Voting was conducted with paper ballots, which made the duration of the count unpredictable, but initial results were expected around 4 hours after the poll closing. Manhunt continues for Nashville police chief's son suspected in shooting of 2 Tennessee officers. Laverne, 10. AP, police in Tennessee were searching Sunday for the estranged son of Nashville's police chief as the suspect in the shooting of 2 police officers outside a Dollar General store. Officers in Laverne, a city about 20 miles, 32 kilometers, southeast of Nashville, were investigating a stolen vehicle outside the store Saturday afternoon when they struggled with the suspect, who pulled a handgun and shot them, said Laverne Police Chief Christopher Mose. Police identified the suspect as John C. Drake Jr., 38, who is the son of Metro Nashville Police Department Chief John Drake. One of the officers was shot twice, in the groin and right forearm, while the other officer was hit in the rear left shoulder. Both were taken to Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville. One of the officers was released from the hospital Saturday night. The other officer was kept overnight for observation and was in stable condition, said Ann Smith, a spokesperson for the city of Laverne. Their identities have not been released. Time equals 400 ms. Greater than the police chief issued a statement Saturday confirming his son was the suspect in the shooting. Drake said they were estranged and over many years he has had only minimal contact with his son. The younger Drake is a convicted felon who resorted to years of criminal activity, he said. Turnover has plagued local election offices since 2020. One swing state county is trying to recover Wilkes-Barre, PA. AP. The polls had just opened for last year's midterms in Pennsylvania when the phones began ringing at the election office in Luzerne County. Polling places were running low on paper to print ballots. Volunteers were frustrated, and voters were getting agitated. Emily Cook, the office's interim deputy director who had been in her position for just 2 months, rushed to the department's warehouse. She found stacks of paper, but it was the wrong kind, ordered long ago and too thick to meet the requirements for the county's voting equipment. Conspiracy theories swiftly began to spread. Republican polling places were being targeted. Democrats overseeing elections were trying to disenfranchise Republicans. The feeling early on in the day was panic, concern, which grew to overwhelming panic, said Cook, a 26-year-old native of Luzerne County. And then at some point throughout the day, there was definitely a feeling of people are starting to point fingers before the day was over, before things were even investigated. Norma downgraded to a tropical storm in Mexico as Hurricane Tammy leaves Barbuda. Time equals 400 ms. Greater than Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, AP. Norma was downgraded to a tropical storm Sunday as it moved into mainland Mexico, while Hurricane Tammy left the Caribbean island of Barbuda with minor damage. Once a Category 4 hurricane, Norma came ashore Saturday as a Category 1 near the Pacific resort of Los Cabos at the southern tip of Mexico's Baja California peninsula. Tens of thousands were left without power there before Tammy made landfall hours later at the same strength. Norma's winds, although weakened, continue to cause damage as the storm moves northeast, crossing the Gulf of California toward the Mexico mainland in the Sinaloa state. Schools there will be closed on Monday and 120 shelters were open, the government said in its official social media. The U.S. National Hurricane Center in Miami said in its latest report that Norma was about 120 miles, 195 kilometers, west of Culiacan, and about 65 miles, 105 kilometers, south-southwest of Los Mochis. The storm is moving northeastward across the Gulf of California with maximum sustained winds of 60 miles per hour, 95 km/h. The NHC expects that heavy rains from Norma will continue impacting Sinaloa at least until Monday, and also some parts of the southern area of Baja California. It warned of flooding and mudslides. Ukrainians prepare firewood and candles to brace for a winter of Russian strikes on the energy grid. Moshchun, Ukraine, AP. In the humble backyard of a destroyed house, a 13-year-old chops firewood to get ready for winter. His mother, Tetiana Yarema, has been preparing for months as she remembers last winter's Russian strikes on the energy infrastructure that plunged Ukraine into darkness. Those were dark days. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to pack my things and go abroad, said Yarema, 48, who says she ended up staying because of her son's insistence. For the Yarema family, like millions of other Ukrainians touched by Russia's war on Ukraine, winter is an especially challenging time. The mother and son live in trailers that were set up in their backyard after fighting in the early days of the war destroyed their house in Moshchun, a village about 25 kilometers, 15 miles, northwest of Kyiv. I have a feeling that when the cold sets in, they'll start bombing again, the woman said, echoing the sentiments of many Ukrainians. AP Top 25. Georgia is number 1 for 19th straight poll, third best streak ever. Alabama in top 10 again. Georgia extended its streak of number 1 rankings in the Associated Press college football poll to 19 straight weeks, the third best in the history of the rankings, and Alabama moved back into the top 10 on Sunday. The Bulldogs received 38 of 63 first-place votes, their second lowest total of the season, after an off week but still bested number 2 Michigan, 1,536 points to 1,504. Time equals 400 ms, greater than Georgia's number 1 streak, which started on October 9, 2022, is behind only Miami's streak of 21 weeks from 2001-02 and Southern California's 33 in a row from 2003-05. The Wolverines received 19 first-place votes after their latest blowout, 49-0 against Michigan State on Saturday night. Michigan was unfazed after a week in which it was revealed the program is being investigated by the NCAA for a sign-stealing scheme that allegedly involved impermissible in-person scouting. Ohio State held steady at number 3 after winning a top 10 matchup with Penn State. The Nittany Lions slipped 3 spots to 10th. The Buckeyes received 3 first-place votes, as did number 4 Florida State. Newsletter success. An email has been sent to with a link to confirm list sign-up. Error. There was an error processing your request. News alerts and top stories. Time equals 400 ms, greater than the latest breaking news, plus our top stories each week. The daily are top headlines each morning, 7 days a week, as well as each weekday afternoon. You must select at least one email list. Please enter a valid email address. Sign up. Manage your lists.